Welcome back to the program. 2 days after pro-Bolsonaro supporters stormed Brazil's federal buildings in Brasilia, thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators marched down Sao Paulo's Paulista Avenue to demand punishments for the perpetrators. Paulista Avenue was filled with protesters protesting the riots in the capital Brasilia while holding signs with messages such as "Democracy Forever." Remember, on Sunday, angry mobs rampaged through Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential offices, smashing windows, furniture, and artwork, in the worst attack on the state institutions since Brazil's return to democracy in the 1980s. Around 1,500 people were rounded up in Brasilia after storming key buildings over the weekend.
Para quem não me conhece, eu sou Débora Lima. São Paulo! Boa tarde, Paulista!
And where is the former Brazilian president as we speak? Mr. Jair Bolsonaro is currently in a hospital in Florida in the United States, having been admitted with intestinal pains related to a stabbing he suffered during the 2018 election campaign. His doctor said the intestinal blockage is not serious and that the former president will likely not need surgery. Bolsonaro tweeted a picture of himself there, lying in hospital, thanking supporters for their prayers and messages of prompt recovery. His wife, Michelle, told her 5.8 million Instagram followers, "My dear ones, I want to inform you that my husband, Jair Bolsonaro, is under observation in hospital due to abdominal discomfort resulting from the aftermath of the stab wound he took in 2018, adding, loved ones are praying for his health." Well, President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva has once again vowed to find those responsible for organizing the attack on the capital, Brasilia. He was speaking to the country's governors on Monday. He said people were removed in the most calm way from around the offices area and that each one of them boarded the police bus and was directed to the federal police. He mentioned there are almost 1,500 people in jail, promised they will remain there until investigations into the attacks are concluded. Also said part of the investigations will also be to determine those who paid for those people to come to the capital to live in those camps near the institutions, including those who provided them with food and water while they were in those camps. It was all smiles as U.S. President Joe Biden and his wife, the First Lady Jill Biden, met with the Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador and his wife at Mexico's National Palace for the North America Summit. President Obrador is hosting President Biden and the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau between Monday and Wednesday for the first summit between the three since late 2021. Mexico last week arrested a prominent cartel leader, Ovidio Guzman, who is wanted in the United States. Weaponry used by Guzman's gang had come into the country from the U.S. border states. The country's leaders are expected to talk about deepening economic ties, even as disagreements persist over López Obrador's nationalist energy policies, which led to Washington and Ottawa launching a formal trade complaint in July. Leaders will also be discussing other issues of national interest, one of which is irregular migration.
So today, we're going to discuss how we can further deepen that relationship, not only in Mexico, but the Western Hemisphere. This includes strengthening our supply chains to make the hemisphere even more competitive. And we're also going to discuss our shared security, including our joint action to address the plague of fentanyl, which has killed 100,000 Americans so far, and how we can tackle irregular migration, which I think we're well on our way to doing. Above all, we both committed to pursuing a better future, one grounded on peace and prosperity for all of our people.
And while the North American leaders meet in Mexico, hundreds of migrants are in limbo in southern Mexico, hopeful of a change in immigration laws in the United States for them to cross the border to an American dream. Last month, the U.S. Supreme Court said it would maintain a COVID-19 era measure for expediting expulsions of undocumented migrants to Mexico until it had time to consider Republican arguments against its repeal, which U.S. President Joe Biden said could extend the curbs until at least the month of June. Meanwhile, the Biden administration says a measure known as Title 42 could soon be applied to more nationalities, including Cubans, Nicaraguans, and Haitians, stirring fears of expulsions and encouraging migrants to seek asylum to safeguard freedom of movement inside Mexico, according to analysts. Mexico currently only accepts certain nationalities expelled from the United States, but is expected to soon take in more under Title 42 as Washington deals with a record 2.2 million migrants arrested at the U.S. southwest border last year. Well, the White House says the U.S. Justice Department is reviewing documents marked classified found in President Joe Biden's former office at a think tank. According to the president's lawyer, about 10 of those files were discovered in a locked closet at the Penn Biden Center in Washington in November by Mr. Biden's legal team. A batch has been handed over to the National Archives. Biden's predecessor, Donald Trump, is facing a probe for taking classified files to Florida after his presidency. The FBI is reportedly involved in the inquiry into classified documents found at the Penn Biden Center, and U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland has been asked to review the papers. Speaking of Washington correspondent Maria Bird, Maria, it almost seems like, the president could be facing charges, for holding on to those classified documents. How does he forget that he was holding on to this even after leaving office as vice president?
Well, it's likely I think that more so, what is the president's? I wouldn't be surprised if there are other former presidents that have some sort of classified document, but we know with all of the accounts and all of what's gone on with Mar-a-Lago and former President Trump, that this is definitely going to be brought forth due to the nature. Now, if you look at the size and the number of files, it's far less than what we saw previously. And so the real question is going to be what was captured in those confidential files. Were there things that released information about the U.S., anything that could have been put the United States at risk? If someone received those confidential files. But I think the greater point here is that confidential files should have not been in a private office. And so now the DOJ has to look into how they will investigate this and how this will move forward.
Let's move over now to the North America Summit holding in Mexico. What's the focus here?
The focus here is really to reaffirm the agreement between Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. I think that is one of the largest pieces when you talk about the neighboring, bordering countries, and all of which has been experienced over the last few years, and specifically as the U.S. works to reaffirm its place within the global economy and using its neighbors to be able to reaffirm North America as one of the continents that has a great impact on the greater world. I think that is going to be the focus, and knowing that immigration is a huge concern, especially as you look at the U.S. And Mexico borders. And so when we talk about, the Los Angeles Protection Act that's been put in place, that was something that's on the table of discussion as well. So at this time, it's really about how do we increase the economic strength of North America as a whole? How do we increase the trade capabilities? Because we know that we're also struggling through ensuring that we have enough trade back and forth between, and there obviously has been some challenge with production in the U.S.
Do they share the same views on immigration, President Biden and President Obrador?
There obviously are some challenges there as far as what they really believe in. I think that this 3-day summit will allow them to be able to work through those core challenges that exist. As you all stated earlier, there's over 4 million people that are detained in the U.S. That have migrated. And so how do we manage that? I think it's going to be one of the greater questions. And then what can be done, which is why the summit is so important, what can be done to reaffirm and to bolster the economic strength of all three countries so that we can find ways to reduce the illegal immigration that occurs across the borders.
As the president attends a summit in Mexico, back in the U.S., President Biden is being criticized for doing too little, too late, in the words of the Texan governor regarding the influx of migrants through the border with Mexico. Are there any hopes that he will take the matter even more seriously, especially after visiting the southern border with Mexico before heading on to this summit?
I think there are hopes. Where we are right now is that we are 2 years into his administration. Any hard stand that he takes with immigration could also take to offense many of those who have been his supporters. But obviously, if he does not do enough, the right is definitely going to be criticizing him for that. So the question is, what are the dangers that exist? He's going to be dealing with anything around violence that is existing at the border. He's also going to deal with anything around housing insecurity and health issues. And I think that's about as much as we're going to be able to get out of the next 2 years. It's really around how can we secure the border so there's a reduction in violence, and also how can we streamline the process to be able to enable the ability for those who are wanting to enter the U.S. legally have that opportunity, and to ensure health and safety risks are reduced.
Now, some U.S. Republican governors did move some of those irregular migrants to Democratic states, and even a few of them were dropped off at the home of the vice president in Washington. Do we know what has happened to those people and where they are now?
Those individuals have been taken and dispersed in various areas that are asylum states. We do have areas within the United States that provide asylum, and then they work on processing paperwork, and those who are able to illegally stay here in the U.S. Follow through that process, and those who are illegally and not able to stay in the U.S. will then be reverted back and sent back home. And so that's pretty much the process that occurs once someone, like you said, has been just dropped off, like you'd have.
So the U.S. is currently implementing Title 42, even though not as decisively as Republicans would want them to. But do the Democrats have any other solution to what's solving America's immigration problem?
The Democrats are going to focus on what the president is going to look at, which is the areas around violence at the border. They're going to be able to increase the ability for individuals to enter U.S. legally. I think there has been a lot of criticism around the lack of processing and the lack of streamlining that. And so I think that's going to be one of their greater focus points, is really around how do we ensure that individuals who have the right to be here in the U.S. or that want the right to be here in the U.S. and that follow a legal process, that process can be more available. Because that's been one of the largest complaints by Democrats, is that the process is just not available for those who are looking to enter the United States.
Thanks again, Maria. We're still in the United States. We're focused on the weather now. At least 12 people have died. Roughly 25,000 more in California were ordered to evacuate yesterday, including the entire town of Montecito and nearby areas of Santa Barbara coast, due to heightened flood and mudslide hazards from a recent string of deadly storms, according to officials. Social media videos shared online show flooded roads and torrents of flood water flowing through next to residential properties in Santa Barbara. Mandatory evacuations have been ordered in 17 California regions. Authorities worry a series of torrential downpours since late December could unleash lethal cascades of mud, boulders, and other debris in hillsides stripped bare of vegetation by past wildfires. President Biden has approved an emergency declaration authorizing the Federal Emergency Management Agency to coordinate disaster relief efforts and mobilize emergency resources in California. A new report says Europe experienced its second warmest year on record in 2022. That's according to European Union scientists. Climate change unleashed record-breaking weather extremes that slashed crop yields, dried up rivers, and led to thousands of deaths. The EU's Copernicus Climate Change Service said 2022 was also the world's fifth warmest year by a small margin. C3S records date back to 1950, but other longer data sets confirmed 2022 was the world's fifth warmest year since at least the 1850s. The last 8 years were the world's eighth hottest on record. Last summer was Europe's hottest on record, smashing temperature records in countries including Italy, Spain, and Croatia. Severe heat waves caused more than 20,000 excess deaths in countries including France, Germany, Spain, and Britain. Welcome back to the last lap of the world today. The wait is over for those who did not manage to nab a copy of Spare when it went on sale in Spain by accident last week. It's the official launch day for Prince Harry's much talked about and dissected memoir. Copies of the book were put on display in bookshops around the country, including one Waterstone store in central London today. And one customer braved the rain to wait outside, keen to get her hands on a copy of the book, which chronicles not only hugely personal details such as how the Duke of Sussex lost his virginity and took illegal drugs, but more intimate private instances of family disharmony. Caroline Lennon found herself in high demand from the media as the only person to arrive there early and buy a copy of the book, which currently ranks as the bestseller on Amazon's UK, US, Australian, German and Canadian websites. After buying the book, she then posed with pictures as the media asked her questions. At one point, Lennon quipped about knowing how the late Princess Diana must have felt, given the attention she was getting. Some stores and train stations in the capital opened even earlier, at just past midnight, to offer fans a chance to get the book.
I like him. I like the royal family. I was here when Diana bought her book out, and I queued up then, and now I'm queuing up again, and I'm enjoying myself. At the moment, I think the man needs to get himself sorted out, because it looks to me like he's carrying the weight of the childhood, the death of Diana. He's carrying it all. With that family, there's no love and no passion. You want that. He wants that back in his life. That's where Diana gave him that love. He wants a lot of affection and love.
Caroline the Star. And let's bring in Channels Television's London correspondent, Teniola Oyetayo, whom I'm sure still hasn't bought the book. Tenny, have you had time to take a glance at it or read a few pages?
Marachi, you're correct. No, I haven't read the book or even bought it. But I think most of the details I'm getting has been mostly on media, as with so many people. I'm sure a lot of Britons, not many people are racing to bookstores to get a copy of the book. As we know, last week, The Sun and the Daily Mail acquired copies of the book early after it was reported it was accidentally put on sale early by a bookshop in Spain. So all weekend, we've been hearing little snippets from Prince Harry's book. So I think a lot of people already have an idea of what to expect. And with what I've observed on social media, some might even feel like they've already read the book with what we're seeing.
Yeah, it almost feels like that, right? With all the interviews and all the analysis that have gone on about what the Duke of Sussex wrote in the book. Now, before it's released, Tenny, we already had heard excerpts of the book, like you said. How has majority of British media reacted to some of the things that Prince Harry says? Because it appears that they are the target, of his attacks in the book, and some of the claims that he made about how they treated him when he was young, how they treated his wife, Meghan, how they treated her differently from other members of the royal family.
I think most British media are being very careful with the way they're reporting this, what many have called whole unraveling by Prince Harry. As we saw with the docu-series with Meghan as well, they're just reporting it as it is being said. There hasn't really been an official media response in particular on the claim that the couple were treated differently from other royals. So they're just basically repeating what the prince is saying.
Yesterday, the Princess of Wales' birthday, Kate. People feared Harry's revelations would overshadow that. Did it? Because some of the interviews did air yesterday, I think on ITV and in the US on Good Morning America.
Well, I wouldn't say so, not particularly. I mean, of course, with the release of 2 more Prince Harry interviews yesterday, all eyes were on the royal family to see how they might respond to these several claims and accusations, including the dispute which we kind of knew about between Meghan and Kate over a bridesmaid's dress, which with tears reportedly involved. But the palace has so far declined to comment, and yesterday celebrated Kate's birthday as normal, with the official royal family Instagram account sharing a picture of the Princess of Wales as she celebrated her 41st birthday.
and a rather muted celebration for her and for the royal family as well. Now, there's an ongoing debate about whether or not, the royal family should respond to the interviews. They're usually not, prone to responding to things like this. While it's not their style, what other ways might their actions be seen as a reaction or a response to some of the claims made by Harry?
So, Rashi, it's quite interesting. It doesn't seem like Buckingham Palace is going to respond and are sort of playing the no reaction method that Harry has spoken about and criticized. If you watch that docuseries, the main thing is how long this silence can go on for, though. We're not too sure. And with the King's coronation coming up this year, I think it will be important to address that before then. But then again, some others have said the silence is an answer to these claims in itself. So we don't really know if or when we'll get a response or what it will be. But what we do know with all the revelations is that Buckingham Palace isn't happy.
Thank you so much, Tenny. Do get your hands on the book as soon as you can. We'd love to hear your thoughts on it. And, of course, a response from the British media.
I'll tell you all about it.
All right. We're still in Britain, though. The failure of the first ever satellite mission launched from UK soil is a setback. But it's not a roadblock. According to analysts of the country's space plans, a rocket suffered an anomaly late on Monday night after its release by a jumbo jet operated by the American Virgin Orbit Company. The satellites it was carrying could not be released and were lost. Plans for the UK to become a satellite launching state are already well advanced. Launches are planned in Scotland from Sutherland and Shetland. These would be the more traditional type of launch systems in which the rocket goes straight up from the ground.
Absolutely devastated. We put our heart and soul into this, and it's such a personal journey for me as well, and my family were here. So yeah, it was pretty rough, but I feel okay, and I think it'll just be a few days of just kind of letting it sink in a little bit.
And we will learn a lot from this. It ended up being a technical error on the second stage. Space is hard, and we'll find out what went wrong, and we hope to see future launches this year from Spaceport Cornwall, in addition to hopefully seeing vertical launches from our launch sites in Scotland as well, at Shetland and Sutherland. What we're trying to do here is set the UK up as being a leading provider of commercial small satellites by 2030, and we are doing that. We are well on the way. And if you look at one of the most successful launch companies right now, that's SpaceX, with a phenomenal launch rate, you only have to look at the early days to realize that they were very, very close to failing. Many of their early rockets failed.
This is not a jacuzzi, neither is it, some relaxation spa somewhere. These are parishioners of a shrine in Tokyo, braving the cold and stepping into an ice bath to purify their souls and pray for the new year. 33 men in loincloths and 7 women in white gowns dipped into a cold bath pool filled with ice blocks twice and chanted for about 4 minutes in total. One of them said her toes were getting sore, but when she finished, she felt refreshed. It's an annual event where they pray for health. They also feel like the new year will not begin without doing this. It's according to one 75-year-old, the oldest participant who has taken part in the ritual ceremony for 18 years. This is the 8th annual Shinto ritual at Teppuzu Inari Shrine was held under a blue sky, with temperature hovering around 9 degrees Celsius. The ritual originally began in 1955 when it was inspired by the former chief priest splashing cold water on himself to pray for the local community's well-being. I guess the chanting helps to ward off the cold. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi.